Peace, my people. You're tuning into I Must Be Bugging, where Black, gifted, and otherwise neurodivergent folks celebrate our special flavors. If you've ever questioned your perspective in a world built for the masses, welcome home. I'm your host, Sheldon Gay, and I appreciate you joining me on this journey as a late-identified Black, gifted man. Together, we'll rewrite the script on neurodiversity by celebrating our differences, challenging the status quo, and breaking free from old narratives that label us as deficient. In each episode, we'll explore the stories, experiences, and of course the curiosities of Black gifted adults and other neurodivergent people who are underrepresented or unidentified in a world where normal can also mean harmful. So continue with me on this journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and acceptance. I Must Be Bugging is creating safe spaces, sparking conversations, and making sure our voices are heard. Welcome back for part 2 of my interview with Dr. Dave Hester. If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and listen to part 1 and then join us again for part 2. It'll make the conversation, one, simply make more sense, but you'll get the full picture of what Dave is sharing. If you have already listened to part 1, enjoy the rest. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just really helpful because I think particularly the closer that the folks are to us, right? The more that we feel that love energy, the harder it is to see them on that edge, right? Fumbling around like, am I getting there? And, you're like, dude, like you're on the edge, like back up. And you're like, sometimes they've got to kind of stick that foot out and feel like, oh, wait, there's nothing there. And like, hopefully pull themselves back. Or sometimes, they've got to figure out how to fly, on their way down, as it were, right? Like that seems kind of, crude, but at the end of the day, right? Like people, like you said, people have to be allowed to walk their journey, and, kind of go from there. And there's even times, where, I'll talk about me. I won't necessarily talk about other people, but I also am trying to make sure that I'm being aware of the times when someone did let me, fall, as it were, right? Mm-hmm. And realize that wasn't necessarily a lack of care, right? It wasn't that they didn't care about me or that they were looking forward to me falling. And not hold them responsible for it, right? And that is a key, part of it as well, because sometimes it can feel like, wait, I'm down here with a broken arm and leg, and you didn't let me, it's like, so yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, but I thank you for sharing that. I think that'll be helpful for folks.
I hope it's helpful. And I hope one other thing to be helpful is to say, challenge your perspective on people, meaning some people look at other people and they'll say, "What?" Like you said, why didn't you help me? I'm falling. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you do something? And then we sometimes project onto them. I needed help. I was abandoned, so I'm going to put something on you. And challenge that perspective sometimes. Mm-hmm. we give other people a lot more power than I think they have.
This is a great segue / just like a great way to talk about so like my kind of quote unquote prepared questioning is really around I'll say it like this: as neurodivergent people, we see the world differently, right? Mm-hmm. And so it necessarily means that there are going to be times when our worldview may not necessarily align with other people, certainly, but there may be times when again, I noticed you've seen this as a therapist, right? Where it seems like life is, whatever, treating somebody in a certain way, but the reality is maybe a little bit different. And I guess my question around that then is, how does one, or what are some affirming ways for us to walk that healing and, thriving journey to go from a place where it does, it does seem like all we have is our trauma, or the fear, the anxiety, right, to move into a place where we say, again, I'm going to, like, I'll like I said, for me, I'll speak about me. For me, one of the things that's challenging for me is because, you know, most people may see 5 possibilities. I may see 15 or 20. When
Mhm.
something happens, I'm like, seeing this wide swath, like from the good to the bad, right? And the challenge becomes, how do I make sure that I'm acknowledging all of them? Like, I don't want to deny, for me, I don't want to deny any of them as a possibility, but I want to make sure that in acknowledging them, that I'm not identifying with them, right?
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
um, you know, telling myself that, well, this is what happened because, I had this emotion come up, so this must be what happens. And I'm hoping that. I mean, I see you nodding, and no one else can see you nodding. I can see you
Oh
nodding,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm with
yeah.
you. I'm with you.
So yeah, tell me. I mean, just if you can share maybe a little bit about how, like I said, we can move from that space to where we can kind of heal and thrive a little bit more.
Yes, healing and thriving is a constant challenge, especially because you're. It really hit home with me when you in your example,
Mm-hmm.
because of how I think as well, and my background. I've been called cold and
Mm-hmm.
scientific because something's brought up, and I'm like, I see 20 other ways where this can go, risky.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about not identifying with it, that is the real challenge,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to identify.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to challenge something too. We want to even
Go ahead.
identify with, I'm a black man. That's my
Mm-hmm.
part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
But how much of that identity is really what I believe? How much of it is environmental? How much of
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is just societal, meaning systemic, meaning that it's a kind of collected understanding that I'm
Mm-hmm.
now adopting?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so when you talk about bringing that back to identifying small variables in a situation, when you see the wide swath of options, the best thing to do is to take a higher level view. Daniel Kahneman talks about system 1, system 2 thinking. Kind of,
Mm.
you kind of have this first thought, like, that's it. This is where we're going to go. And then you take a step back. And so I always do this fun thing where I take a zoom out, meaning life's a game. Play the
Mm-hmm.
game how you will. Have fun, or the game's just not going to be fun.
Right. Right.
And I've decided that one fun part of my game is, and if anyone's played like Grand Theft Auto 5, that's the most latest one, I believe. There's another one coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Complete side note: Grand Theft Auto is a horrible game. I want to say that on wax. It is a
There you go.
horrible game showing the degradation and disgustingness of humans.
Mm.
With that being said, I've played each and every one of them because it's a wonderful game, and I like to play it.
I
And
love this. I love this. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
we're such an interesting species.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's
so
exactly it. Go ahead.
so bringing it back in Grand
Mm-hmm.
Theft Auto 5, if you're playing one of the characters, when you're bouncing from another character, it takes a higher view. You kind of get a
Mm.
view of the entire map, and then you slowly, sink down into the player. So I
Mm-hmm.
pretend that sometimes I can do that, where I can zoom out and I can see, okay, if I identify with these negative tracks, what could that lead to? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, I might get attached to it. I might start compulsively thinking about it. Well, I'm losing sleep. Now I'm frustrated. Oh no, I'm dipping into a depression. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't even the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
Or I take it and I identify with this positive variable, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this has got to work. I'm putting all my chips in this. I'm focused on it. I'm going to make it happen, and then it doesn't work. What happens when I have attachment to that and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen? That brings pain. That brings
Mm-hmm.
suffering.
Absolutely. Actually, yeah.
So yeah, that's one way to do it, is to to do an experiment. We're doing experiments every day. This morning,
Mm-hmm.
when you decided, and if everybody, anyone listening, and I hope you're having fun, you listen. If you decided to eat cereal, you were doing an experiment. You're like, you're making choices, you're experimenting, you're tinkering. Why don't we don't do it enough with our psyche, with our mind?
Mm-hmm.
We want to fundamentally change physical objects, anything that we
Mm-hmm.
can tangibly hold. But the kind of the etheric, for lack of better words, or the things that we can't see that maybe aren't even corporeal, those things we have trouble with.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my one thing.
No, that again, this is I love this conversation. One of the things that you talked about that I thought was like a real like bang the gong moment was just talking about the suffering around when we choose to identify with something. Like one of the biggest fears that folks have in this like healing and thriving journey is, if I choose this positive viewpoint, let's say, right, I choose to identify with this positive viewpoint and it doesn't happen, there's suffering in that. And I don't want that. I've got enough of that, right? Like I'm doing that anyway. Why would I let me stay kind of in this safe zone? And I think one of the best things is realizing, well, everything is like a crapshoot, right? Like, there's inherent risk in all of this, right? And I know sometimes I've said that to people and it's really frustrated them because it's like, for me, in my mind, is because I'm exposing kind of that truth that doesn't allow them to kind of hide in that. Or I don't want to say hide. I don't want to seem like there's a lack of compassion around it, because we all kind of have our safe spaces. But, what I mean is that, it reveals the fact that they're trying to hide from risk is a fool's errand, right? Like there's risk in everything. And so I know through my therapy, one of the things my therapist has really helped me to do is to say, yes, those things are possible, right? Those negative things or whatever might be possible, but you can't, your possibilities of a positive outcome are significantly increased if you take this other option, because we know what's going to happen. Like
Approach,
we know
right.
pretty much what's going to happen, right? So, being aware that there may be a time where you choose the positive and something, unexpected or undesired happens, but not kind of making that tell you that the story is not to do that, but just to say, well, again, I'm learning, I'm experimenting. This didn't work this time. It doesn't mean that the next time it won't work, or it doesn't mean that I can't make a tweak to, right? But not thinking that pain or possible pain itself is the thing that kind of would keep us from doing it, because pain and possible pain is going to be in any scenario that we choose, right? So
it's in everything.
It's in everything. It's in everything. And that's, I'm just thinking about like literally some conversations that I have where it was like, I'm sorry to say this, but that's just kind of the reality of just the physical laws of this, this universe, that there is, there's no way to 100% control the outcomes going forward. There's no way to do that with absolute certainty. So, except that, I want to actually, I don't know if you said Star Wars or Star Trek. I didn't say, no, you said Star Trek earlier, which I'm a Trekkie. And
wonderful. I was about to say I'm fluent in both. A little bit of Klingon.
Okay.
I spoke a little bit at my wedding. My wife was like, "You better stop," and I was like, "All right, no problem."
I have stopped myself because I feel like I would learn Klingon and then I would definitely be that guy. But I was gonna say, one of my favorite moments in Next Generation is when Data. So for those who don't know, Data is essentially like this android, right? And his the big part of his like story arc is about kind of learning to be human. And so, excuse me, he essentially in this episode is grappling with the fact that he did all these things, all the right things, made all the so-called like optimized decisions, and the things still didn't turn out, desirable. And so he's talking with Captain Picard, and Picard basically says to him, it's possible to do all things right and still not get, the desired outcome. And that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that, you that's a part of life, essentially, right? Like that's just a possibility, right? And it doesn't mean anything about you or
Taking it personal, yeah.
right.
About you.
There's no reason to take right. There's no reason for you to take that personal, because when we accept the inherent risk and everything, we realize that it's not that life is punishing me, right? It's not life teaching me like, see, you shouldn't have been like. No, it's like sometimes you can do everything right, everything that could, to your best of your abilities, and stuff still doesn't go your way. And
that reminds me of a.
Go ahead.
Forgive me for jumping in, but this
No,
happened
go
last
ahead.
night. In two ways, this happened last night. This will date us a little bit in the future, but it was a Monday night football game between the Seattle Seahawks and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes.
And one of the secondaries did everything right. Secondaries being the person covering the different sides of the field, preventing a wide receiver to tight end, a receiver from catching the ball. And they did everything right. But because one of Seattle's teammates was there, exactly. It allowed his leg to kind of he hit his teammate's leg to then hit the ground, and then boom, they've got the catch, changes the trajectory of the game. But that person did almost everything right, and it just didn't turn out. So that was one way. This all happened yesterday. Then I went shopping yesterday. Went shopping, grabbed my stuff, realized I had forgot most of it. I'm at a big box store, wherever you are in the country or in the world, whatever that name is for you, Sam's, Costco, BJ's, whatever. So it's raining. It's 42 degrees, pretty much cold outside. And I decided to walk my groceries to my car. So you talk about making those decisions. And I said, all right, if I walk now, I may be able to skip a little bit of the rain. I was wrong. But in skipping that and trying to skip the rain and get to the car, put the food in the car, I forgot to add one element, which was I had ordered food, but the food was taking a while, so I had to go back. When I went back, they misstepped the order. Fast forward, I ended up spending an extra 20 minutes in this big box store. Guy next to me spent 30 minutes. So again, there's always somebody who's got a little worse than you. So even though we had a conversation. But I'm bringing this story up because it's rainy, it's dreary. People sometimes find that depressing. I made a mistake in the time that I left, which elongated my time there. These mistakes could have piled up. And instead of beating myself up, taking it personally that maybe they gave my food away on purpose, they were trying to hurt me. Or it's raining on purpose because let's say I don't believe in God. This metaphorical God is trying to punish me by making it rain. Or, I'm stuck in this big box store because I'm the worst and I'm blaming myself.
Yep.
Instead, I had fun each step of the way. While I was walking in the rain, I was like, this is it. This is happening. And it's okay. I'm walking in the rain back for the second time, trying to go get my food, but that's okay. That's okay.
No, I love that. First of all, shout out to all my Philly people. I know last night was a rough one.
Yeah. My fam was not happy, but that's all right.
Yeah. So, but again, I think you're reinforcing a really important point, which is that, and I'm assuming this, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I know if I were in your scenario and kind of talking about, going back to what I was saying too, about some of the challenges with, neurodivergent minds, and maybe I'll speak to it directly in a couple seconds, but like you talked about, experiencing joy kind of along the way. And I'm, again, for me, I know that there would still have been times when I've been annoyed, like, oh dang, man, I gotta wait, right? Like I came back, I thought I can still experience joy despite that emotion or that thought coming up, right? And that is a huge, huge thing, because sometimes we can experience that thought and that kind of spirals, because now we're like, oh, I'm feeling bad about this thing. Why am I feeling? And right, and it just kind of like spirals, whatever your spiral may look like, right? And I'll just kind of call this out, and I don't mean call it out like as if there's some sort of like adversarial aspect to it, but I just mean, I'm just going to speak to this, which is that I know that, some people may refer to it as like rejection sensitivity. I learned a term, I don't know, a couple of days ago where people were calling it emotional emotional permanence.
I've never
Right,
heard of that.
which, yeah, right, I'd never heard of it either, but basically this woman, she was describing emotional permanence in the same way that people experience object permanence, right? So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and again, for those who don't know, right, that's like the basic concept. Like with kids, the reason why peekaboo is such a great game for them is that when you cover your face, for them it's like you've kind of like disappeared, right? It's like, whoop, this thing is gone. And once they realize, like, that obviously right now, you play peekaboo, it wouldn't be the same kind of joy, right? It might be silly and fun, right? But it wouldn't have the same kind of joy. But that's kind of the thing. At some point, the human mind realizes, oh, that thing is still there, right? I can understand that that's still there. And emotional permanence is this experience around people who, if, for example, their girlfriend, boyfriend, whomever, their partner, right, is not there to reinforce that love. I'm like oversimplifying, right? But like, if you're not there to tell me that you love me, I may not recognize that. And I may experience certain, emotions around the fact that like I'm questioning, right? As opposed to being like, just before such and such left out, they kissed me, they hugged me, they told me they loved me. That still sits with me. It's still here. I recognize that. And so that was kind of a fascinating, like, oh yeah, I can, like, it got my mind kind of thinking. But excuse me, I'm sharing these things because, again, if these are things that you're experiencing and maybe that you're prone to, some of, if those things come up, like, you may never be able to get rid of that per se, right? But you have an opportunity to, again, through the healing and thriving journey, to say, this thing came up. I recognize it as what it is. I'm going to, however, choose to this other path, right? And how do I get to get my mind right to choose, right, this other path? Because I recognize that for what it is, and I recognize that as a part of myself too. Because sometimes people, again, I'm not trying to like belabor this point, but like sometimes people try to like cut out that piece of them, and when it doesn't go away, they feel terrible. They're like spending all these years beating themselves up because that thing is still there. And it's like, excuse me, maybe the goal isn't for it to be completely cut away. Maybe it's for it to be acknowledged and,
and named.
like, right, and named, right, and named, right? Exactly, acknowledged and named, and said, I always go back to this Rumi, the Rumi poem about the house, the house guest, right? When it's like,
hey,
I know
they can't see me. I'm doing elation movements where my hands are flaring in the air because I love Rumi. I actually have, I absolutely love Rumi.
Yeah.
Go for it. You were mentioning the poem.
Showing Rumi. Yes, there we go. So like, again, being able to welcome all those emotional guests in, the good, the quote unquote good or bad, but the anger, the happiness, all those things, let them come through your door. And actually, just very quickly, it's also reminding me, when we were talking about Grand Theft Auto, right? Like, this is what's so fascinating, so paradoxical about the human experience, is that we can say, like, I acknowledge that this isn't like, I played God of War the other day, right? God of War, super brutal. But particularly the recent versions of God of War, oh my gosh, the story, the empathy, the storytelling about the human experience, oh my gosh, like, just so deep, right? And so it's okay to live with those complexities, right? If you can kind of, again, as you said, name them, right? If you can kind of know, this is a thing. Like, I'm not actually going to go and try to chop off, somebody's arms and legs, right? Like, that's not what I'm going to do. And if I enjoy playing a game that includes that, that doesn't directly mean that I'm, this bad person or whatever. But anyway, like I said, I'm kind of going on and on, but I'll just say that, again, I just love, again, talking about holding all those complexities and recognizing that we'll have these emotions, and it's okay to have those emotions. It's perfectly fine to have those emotions. But we still need to do the work to name them and find a healthy space for them to exist, so that we don't go into those spirals. So, again, I'm looking at the time. I borrowed a lot of your time. I got maybe like one more question for you, but I didn't. I wanted to also leave space if you wanted to say anything else about what I just, what we were just talking about, I should say.
All I'll add is name it, call it out, and accept that it's happening. Even if it's not the best thing, find the joy in it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, before you tell us about, any projects that you got going on, and I'm hoping that, in the future, we got to get you back on. That this has, been an amazing conversation. But before this time that, we end, I wanted to ask you, like, maybe what are like 2 things that you wish the world knew or built more capacity for? And I think I kind of might know, but yeah, tell me what you're thinking.
So I wish we had more capacity for people who are different. Start there. It's a high level, right? Let's take it a little lower. And when I say capacity, I mean capacity for the wide range of differences. We were talking, earlier, just about kind of some of the topics that we would go through. And when I saw that you were, that we were discussing what we face as Black people, as Black men, it really is close to my heart. I spent a lot of my formative years in support with my family as well, but also with a white Lutheran family who's from Germany. And I was born in Germany, so there's a lot of connection there too. And every time I think about my godmother, I'm reminded about how she creates, space for me being me, as well as everyone in my family, not in a tokenization way, in a true, I love this human being that's different technically from me, but has no difference at all. And specifically for me, and I'm glad that I can actually express this because it happened recently. As a Black man, I have to think about, and the way I'm built, I look like a medium-sized ball player. Take that what you will, maybe footballer in the UK. They're not as tall as everybody, but I have to, and I'm not saying make myself small, but I have to be unnecessarily cognizant about how I show up in the world in certain situations that other people don't have to. And just recently, I was on a path to my vehicle, and 2 women, 1 woman of color, 1 white woman, was on that same path. I had to really think about how am I showing up for them, and there's so much that goes into that. One is, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what the challenges is. I am learning, and I'm doing my best to show up as best I can, teach my son how to be a gentleman and how to show up the best he can. Same thing with my daughter, to be the best woman she can, but to not to be that powerful Black woman that's never hurt. So I'm trying. So I'm teaching all that. So what I'm saying is, there's so much complexity in this decision that I'm about to tell you that I made, including, have these women been wronged by men? On the other side, is the white woman, does she have an implicit bias towards me? Has she been affected negatively by someone who looks like me? All of these complexities go into my head, and so while we're on this same path, I divert. I divert and go around, and in a way that makes my presence and my, I guess, energy, hopefully put them in a place of ease, that I'm not following them, that I'm not going to harm them, or I'm just not up to no good, or whatever. But I have to think about that while other people are thinking about the season finale of Friends from 50
Right.
years, 30 years ago. And
Right.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying that on a recency thing. That's a recency bias because
Yeah.
of a movie
Yes.
that uses
Yeah.
Friends. I'm not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
talk about the end of that movie. But yes, so that's just a recency bias there. But just being a Black person who's grown up, with the challenges I've had, and specifically people say, "Oh, you speak so well," and I'm not saying that as a down thing. I say people say that in relation to when they find out about my history, and it's like, yeah, I had to work on that. But then also, now that I've worked on that, there's another group that is kind of like, well, you speak so well. You see how that sounds different? How that feels a little different, and we don't have enough space for people to be different. We use a lot of heuristics and schema and stereotypes and
Yep.
easy pathways. Take a break from those drawn out, crappy medieval pathways. Build new ones. Build space for people, regardless of their sexual orientation. If they're transgender, IDGAF, they are humans too, having a unique experience. If they're neurodivergent, we got to leave out all this because you're different. That gives me the right, as a person who's not different, to subject you to many words that typically mean bad things.
Yes.
So I won't leave it on bad things because that.
No.
So yeah, so I'll say one more good thing, which is that the great thing is specifically about being a Black man is that, I talked about this earlier, my privilege. I have some incredible privilege. If I go into a Y right now and there's no other, NBA players, I'm getting picked up. I'm getting picked up. All right, let's run. Right. On the other side, I got a lot of privilege when I wear some really wacky and sometimes unusual things. Like right now, I am rocking a pink fuchsia kind of, it's a unicorn. But it blows out a bubble full of glitter. I carry these around with me. And so, but because I'm a Black man, some people, they don't know what to take from it. They're like, what's your sexual orientation? Are you, and it's like, no, I'm just a guy who likes unicorns. But me being me and me being a Black man, sometimes I don't get approached as much. Whereas I've seen my friends who have been approached or slightly disrespected or undermined. And then to flip back, one last thing on the bad side, the microaggressions are happening more. And sometimes they're not even microaggressions, they're micro inconsiderations. And I am trying to be better at my micro inconsiderations. Meaning, when am I not being considerate of another human where I can make their life a little bit better than it was a moment before?
Yeah, man. Yeah, everything you said was amazing. And actually, before I forget, because for the listeners, right, they know that I am. I've called myself a bell hooks disciple, and so one of the things you talked about reminded me of one of my favorite. I think it's one of my favorite bell hooks quotes because I think it's super insightful from multiple angles. And so, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share this. She spoke about. She says the fear of maleness that they inspire estranges men from every female in their lives to greater or lesser degrees, and men feel the loss. And I'm reading that because even just in that line is a couple of different. There's more to it, but for me, there's so much power in that because one, it's speaking to the fact that there is this thing within the patriarchy, within some men that creates what you talked about, right? That fear, and it's real. And so it centers that feeling and understanding like, oh, okay, like I have to understand that that's a part of what's happening in front of me. But there's also this aspect of, men feel that loss as well. And so she goes on to say, ultimately one of the emotional costs of allegiance to patriarchy is to be seen as unworthy of trust. If women and girls in patriarchal culture are taught to see every male, including the males with whom we are intimate, as potential rapists and murderers, then we cannot offer them our trust. And without trust, there is no love. And I love this quote because it's from The Will to Change. It's funny, I was just talking to my friend earlier about how that's like, I got to go back and reread that. It's just such a powerful book. But for me, just that was just, a lot of what you just talked about, I know for me, to be quite honest, and actually as a Black man, two reasons a lot of times, and I'll say this, like when I see white women, a lot of times I'm walking, I'll cross the street. Some of that is for them. Some of that's for me. Mm-hmm. Because I have had instances where I'm just walking, minding my business, and and we don't have to go through the whole, Emmett Till conversations, right? Like there are things for me why I do that, but I'm also a man who is cognizant enough. I'll say that sometimes I'm walking and I'll see women, and I'm maybe trying to, just give a polite nod or whatever, and I can see the distinct, like there's this energy to look away because I don't know who you are. And I could take that personally. Like, oh, and it's like, wait, these are women living an experience that I don't have to personally deal with, because of my privilege. And instead of me kind of getting caught up in my feelings about, pulling out, Bell Hook's book out, look,
right? Like, I'm an ally.
Right, like, right, exactly.
Which is, if you say it, you're pretty much
right, exactly. You pull out the Bell Hook's book while you're walking, right? So, but yeah, like instead of me kind of getting into that energy, I can say that's all that was, right? And also to feel some compassion around that you would have to every single time, feel like I'm not even taking the chance, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think again, you going back and just overall talking about adding the capacity for folks that are different and recognizing how we feel people are different, where maybe there is a difference, but then sometimes where that difference doesn't make somebody, like, I think the problem becomes is when it goes from somebody being different to somebody being othered, right?
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Because you can systematically get others out of the paint, as we've seen in history.
Exactly. And so that for me is the understanding that line, right? Like, because the human mind, again, is the complexity, the paradox of the human mind is that we want to categorize stuff, right? We want to kind of fit, like, when you talk about schema is definitely going to come up. And this series about self-awareness is 100% going to come up, right? Because it is definitely one of those things that a lot of people, again, are just not aware of about how they are, conceptualizing things, and how a lot of that stuff was framed when they were young. And so they go into the world, again, completely unaware that, whatever it is. I mean, again, let me just talk about Black men. Like, all the Black men I heard about, right, were this, and this. All the Black people, all the Black men in my family were this, and this. And never really kind of questioning. And I'm not even talking about necessarily, like, even for me, I'll say, like, not necessarily my personal story, but if I said, like, my uncles were like this, not necessarily like a gendered scenario. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear about that. It's like, my uncles are like this. My dad behaved like that. So when I go out into the world, when I'm relating to other men, particularly older men, this is, kind of what I should expect. And this is how I'm going to operate. And it's like, well, hold on. Does that really make sense? I have an 80-year, I've said this, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but if not, like, I've got an 80-year-old uncle who rarely, if ever, has told me that he loves me. Like, said those words. I say it to him. Love you, unc. Every time I get a chance to see him, love you, unc, blah, 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 blah. Text him, love you, unc. Now, I know that he loves me. There's no question about that. He's, again, even if he doesn't use those words, I could see his difference as, again, this opportunity to be like, well, why don't you fit, again, this schema? Everybody's supposed to tell each other that they love you.
Yeah. Right.
I can, we can go on for days about that, but I just loved again what you just talked about, and just bringing that to light and understanding that there an increased capacity for, compassion and empathy around our differences, and I think it starts again with looking at ourselves to see how we're showing up and how somebody else might see us as different and say, oh, so
like you're different. And I know I've said it before, but you're different and that's okay.
Right.
And you're showing up different, and I'm not going to try to punish you for it because I'm scared. And
yes.
I've been in situations so many times. I've run the spectrum to where I've been in connection with someone. This is actually an interesting story. I was in connection with someone. We were doing a seminar, and I got paired with an older European lady, and she shared with me that really vulnerable, really like just being empathetic and like saying like, all right, I'm trying to be in compassion, which I believe the etymology of the word is like calm is like passion is like suffering. Calm is like together. So it's like suffering together or struggle together. And so she said, I want to bring you in and say that I had a terrible experience where I was harmed by a man who looked similar to you. And now, mind you, while we're doing this, we're at a seminar. I'm literally holding her hands. I can't run. Like, I can't say, oh gosh, well, let me move away. Instead, I softened. And I said, she had a different experience. That's all right. I want to know. So I asked her about it. She told me about it. And I said, why did you feel the need to tell me? She said, because when we were paired together, you gestured, you smiled, you did the things that I didn't expect you to do. And you made me feel comfortable. And so I wanted to make sure to tell you. And the moral isn't to try to make everyone feel comfortable, but what I learned from that is how I show up in the world matters.
Yeah.
How my energy that I put out in the world really comes back to me. So if I'm putting out that I don't want to talk to anybody who's different from me, and this goes across the spectrum, political ideology, religious ideology, food ideology. I'm not talking to any meat eaters. I'm a vegetarian. And by doing that, you cut yourself off from so much. I've learned so much from people who are different from me, more than the group of people that I connect with that know everything about me. I've learned so much from the difference. So make space and then be fine with it. And I love that in your example where that happened for you, you didn't take it personally, because for people of a certain age, there's this thing that used to happen years ago called, let's see, you had Freaknik in the 90s. Never went. As I was like young. And then there was like bike rally and keep going. There's all these events.
The Greek,
And Greek picnics. Okay. So all of these events, I noticed something. I didn't notice it until I was like, of course, my brain had fully developed. I was over 25. Interesting, people. Keep that in mind. Stop saying I'm grown when you're 18. Your brain's not fully developed.
Right.
Just because you pay bills doesn't make you grown. This can be a little antagonistic. I'm also talking to myself because I said I was grown at 18 and I wasn't. But at 25, I noticed, and I was talking about all those events where those men would take things personal. They try to, hey ma, hey shorty, different. I'm going different years in that terminology.
Different years. Yep.
Different year. You know what I'm saying? And they're doing that, and then they take it personally when someone says no or moves away. And then when I remember the first time I noticed it, and I was disgusted that somebody was taking it personally because that wasn't what that person wanted, and they violated their space. They may have violated them by touching them. They may have violated them by verbally accosting them or verbally, saying negative things to them. And it's like, how have we lost the human decency to just accept this woman doesn't want you holding her hand?
Right.
Yeah. What's going on there? Anyway, I don't know. I don't have the answer to these questions.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe we'll circle back, like I said, later when we can dig some more into that. Because, like I said, I think I mean, honestly, there were questions we didn't even get to. There's so much more to chat, but I just love our conversations so much. And like I said, I'm going to give you one last, the last opportunity to just say, again, if there's any projects that you're working on that, you want folks to know about, if there's ways for folks to follow or connect with you, go ahead, please tell folks about it.
Sure. So this is my usual rundown. I'm only on one social, which isn't technically a social. Some people see it as a resume builder. It's called LinkedIn.
Right.
That's kind of the only social that I'm a part of. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn as David Hester Jr. Please go to my organization, Musing U, MUSIG, the letter U, and you can find my entire bio there, which will connect you with my other projects. I've got a couple of neural devices and research into the neuroscience of engineering flow that I'm working on with an organization. Follow me as well if you're on YouTube. We do a Connect podcast through LifeGuides as well. You can check that out. That's it. Not really big with promo. I typically let that happen for other people, but if you want to drop a line, feel free to.
Yes. Please do. Like I said, I'll put all this stuff into the show notes. And that's definitely one of the things, like I said, when we get a chance to circle back, is to talk more about tech side. Because one of the things we connected on, right? We're both, first of all, we've got a lot in common, but a lot. But the tech part and leveraging that, I think I've told you before, like my personal, belief is that I was put here to leverage technology to create a more equitable, just, and joyous world. And so I definitely want to hear about, the neural stuff that you're working on, or expound some more upon that. And, can keep talking about all this fun stuff. But Dave, thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much for making, the time. And man, like I said, let's stay connected. And, hopefully, I know that everybody enjoyed this. I'm not even gonna say hopefully. Everybody enjoyed this. We'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks. Thank you for joining me for another episode of I Must Be Bugging. I hope you've learned something, became curious, and most importantly, felt affirmed by what you heard. Remember, this podcast is all about sharing compassionate narratives about who we are and how we contribute to the beautiful and necessary diversity of humanity. This is our place to unmask and just be. Don't forget to connect with me on IG at I Must Be Buggin', where I'm eager to see you share your thoughts, your experiences, and your stories. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Leave a review and subscribe. It helps others who are eager for community find our people. So thank you again for being a part of the I Must Be Buggin' community. I can't wait for the next episode. Until then, stay up and enjoy who you were meant to be. And remember, you're not bugging, you're brilliant.